There is a very specific, uh, almost dizzying feeling you get when you look through a really powerful microscope for the first time.
Oh, absolutely.
Or conversely, when you look out the window of a plane at like 30,000 feet,
Mm.
it's this sudden jarring loss of scale. You're staring at something, and for a split second, your brain just completely misfires.
Yeah, short circuits.
Right. You
Yeah.
literally cannot tell if you're looking at an entire galaxy or just, a single drop of pond water.
Well, your brain is desperately searching for a familiar landmark, right? Like a tree or a car or a blood cell, just to tell it how big or small the world actually is.
Hmm.
And when it can't find one, the cognitive engine sort of stalls out. And that's when you get that profound sense of vertigo.
And that exact visual vertigo is what we're staring at today in this deep dive. We have a single source material in front of us. It's an abstract canvas, and it is entirely built to short-circuit your sense of scale.
It really is.
So imagine this really large square canvas. Around the very edges, there's a stark, slightly rough white border acting almost like a quarantine zone.
That's a great way to describe it.
And inside that border, the canvas is just utterly dominated by intense, incredibly fluid sweeps of crimson, rust, and burnt orange. It just stops you in your tracks.
Mhm.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to decode this complex crimson terrain. We need to figure out what makes this image feel simultaneously like a satellite photograph of a deeply hostile planet and a microscopic view of living, breathing, biological tissue.
What's fascinating here is how this specific piece uses color and texture to bypass your logical brain entirely. I mean, abstract art often gets a reputation for being kind of impenetrable.
Yeah, totally.
But this piece, it evokes an immediate visceral reaction before your cognitive centers even have a chance to try and process what it is you're looking at. You feel the physical weight of the painting before you even attempt to read its meaning.
Definitely. And before we even touch on the philosophical meaning,
Yeah.
we need to orient you to the physical geography of the piece itself, because there is a very distinct, almost aggressive topography to it.
There really is.
Like looking at the right side of the canvas, there's this massive, thick wash of bright blood red pigment. And it doesn't look flat. It looks like it's actively flowing, like a river of cooling magma. Or, and this is where that visceral feeling really kicks in, like a raw, open wound.
Yeah, the viscosity is palpable. The artist has layered the pigment so thickly that you can almost feel the gravitational drag on that red paint. It behaves exactly like a non-Newtonian fluid under stress.
Wow. And then moving your eyes over to the left side of the piece, the texture just shifts entirely. The rich reds wash out into these lighter, almost dusty, fractured orange sections.
It's a stark contrast.
It is. Suddenly, that flowing magma looks more like scarred, cracked earth in a desert.
Mhm.
Or, going back to the biological view, it looks like stretched, translucent cellular membranes. It plays absolute tricks on the viewer. I look at this and feel like I'm either observing a Martian crater through an orbital lens or zooming in on a scab under an electron microscope.
It's highly disorienting.
So how does an artist actually engineer this ambiguity of scale? I mean, I can't stop looking at it, but my brain cannot lock on to a definitive answer of what it actually is.
Well, the artist is basically exploiting the inherent geometric rules of the natural world. This duality, the macro scale representing planetary or volcanic forces versus the microscale representing biological or cellular structures, it relies on a fundamental physical law.
Okay.
The universe organizes itself using self-similarity, which is the core principle of fractal geometry.
Meaning the underlying shapes remain mathematically identical regardless of how far in or out you zoom.
Exactly. I mean, the universe is fundamentally lazy in the best possible way. It uses the most energy-efficient blueprints to move matter and energy from one place to another. So the way a massive river delta branches out as it meets the ocean to disperse water that is physically and mathematically identical to the way microscopic capillaries branch out inside your lungs to disperse oxygen.
That is wild to think about.
Right. And the chaotic fluid dynamics of a dying star exploding into a nebula, they look remarkably like a single human cell bursting under osmotic stress. By utilizing these universally recognizable fluid shapes, the pooling, the branching, the dragging flows, the painting forces you to inhabit both the microscopic and the cosmic spaces simultaneously.
It just refuses to let you settle. Your brain is constantly toggling back and forth, big, small,
Yeah.
planet, cell. It turns the whole act of viewing into an active investigation.
It forces you to participate.
It does. But just as you start to get comfortable getting lost in all those sweeping organic flows of red and orange, you hit the scratches. And here's where it gets really interesting. But honestly, a bit baffling.
Ah, yes, the white markings.
Yeah. I'm looking at these highly deliberate, stark white markings sprinkled across the crimson background, and I am just not buying it as a cohesive artistic choice.
Really?
Yeah. It looks like someone took a white marker and vandalized a beautiful gradient. You have to convince me I'm wrong, because right now it just feels like random doodling.
Well, this raises an important question about the human imperative to categorize our environment, especially when we feel overwhelmed. Let's look closely at what those markings actually are before we just dismiss them as vandalism.
Okay, fair enough. They're very specific. Near the upper middle of the canvas, there's a distinct number 1. Over on the mid-left side, there's a 2. Down in the bottom left corner, a 3. And right beneath the 3 is this strange, delicate little white squiggle.
Yep.
And floating over on the lower right side, sort of swallowed up in that thick red magma wash, is the letter P. And scattered around all these letters and numbers are crude little circles and rough hexagonal shapes. They're incredibly sharp and fragile against the thick, bleeding red background.
Right, because they are entirely synthetic. Numbers, letters, and geometric grids, you don't find those in the organic fluid dynamics we were just discussing.
No, you definitely don't.
When human beings are faced with incomprehensible chaos, whether that's an environmental disaster or a completely unregulated biological event, our deepest evolutionary instinct is to try and index it. If we can measure it, we feel like we can survive it. We throw down a grid.
Oh, wow. It's like a crime scene photographer dropping those little yellow plastic evidence tents next to scattered debris.
That's exactly it.
The numbers 1, 2, and 3 don't actually stop the chaos of the crime scene, but they trick our brains into feeling like we've quantified the violence.
That is the perfect mechanism to understand this piece. These white markings represent the rational, synthetic human mind desperately trying to impose order on a space of pure, chaotic, organic flow. They're literally evidence markers in a disaster zone.
It makes so much sense.
And the contrast is what makes it brilliant. The red is loose, bleeding, and entirely governed by physics, while the white numbers are sharp, rigid, and entirely governed by human logic. And notice how delicate the white paint is compared to the heavy crimson. The rational mind looks like it's about to be completely swallowed up by the irrational body.
Yeah, the numbers are absolutely fighting a losing battle here. But, you say these white numbers are trying to control the chaos, but looking at the edges of the canvas, it looks like the painting is actually fighting back against its own borders.
How so?
Well, the white numbers aren't the only anomalies breaking up the red landscape. As you move away from that fiery, boiling red center and toward the stark white border, the paint turns into this dark, murky, almost toxic, greenish-black pigment. It clings really heavily to the left and right sides of the canvas.
It does. It creates a structural boundary, but a highly aggressive one. We actually have to look at color theory to understand the physical sensation of looking at those edges.
Let's get color theory.
Right. Red and green are complementary colors. They sit on exact opposite sides of the color wheel. When you place a highly saturated red directly next to a dark, murky green, your optic nerve actually struggles to process the boundary between them. It creates a phenomenon called visual vibration.
Oh, it literally tires your eyes out to look at the intersection of those two colors. It makes the center feel like it's buzzing or vibrating.
Yeah.
So if the red center is a flowing river of lava, those dark greenish-black edges feel like creeping moss or cooling ash, slowly trying to reclaim the volcanic flow. It's suffocating the center.
That's a great observation. The dark green edges are squeezing the red center, which creates a sense of immense claustrophobic pressure. We are basically looking at a closed thermodynamic system here. The red isn't just flowing freely, it's boiling because it's trapped by those heavy, dark fringes.
And when you have that much violent, trapped energy contained within a really tight space, something inevitably has to rupture. Which brings us to probably the most jarring part of the entire canvas. Down near the bottom left and bottom center, completely defying the reds, the dusty oranges, and the suffocating dark greens, are these sudden, bright pink, almost magenta smudges.
Yeah, they really stand out.
They're practically neon. In a world of aggressive earth tones and decaying organic matter, these synthetic-looking pink bursts seem entirely alien. What mechanism is driving those? Are they like an error in the artist's palette, or are they the actual focal point of all this pressure?
They are the pressure release valve. In any system, whether it's geological or biological, when extreme pressure causes a rupture, you don't just get more of the same material, you get a fundamental chemical transformation.
Okay.
Those jarring magenta pink spots are the reaction. They don't look like earth or lava. They look like a sudden, highly mutated growth happening in the direct aftermath of the red chaos and the green pressure colliding.
Oh, I see it. It looks like an extremophile bacteria blossoming in a petri dish of boiling blood.
That is a very vivid image, but yes.
Well, extremophiles thrive in environments where absolutely nothing else can survive, right? Like deep-sea thermal vents. The pink is so small compared to the sweeping, massive reds, but your eye just snaps right to it because it's the only element breaking the visual rules the rest of the canvas established.
Right, everything else on the canvas is following the rules of natural decay, gravity, and fluid flow. The pink is something entirely unprecedented. It's a mutation.
So what does this all mean? We've got sweeping volcanic magma, biological cellular textures, fragile white evidence markers trying to catalog the mess, suffocating dark borders, and these neon mutating pink blossoms. We look at deep, intense crimson red, and our human brains are hardwired to see danger. We see a bleeding wound or a violent volcanic eruption actively destroying a landscape. But looking at the fluid dynamics in those pink extremophiles, is it possible this canvas isn't depicting a disaster at all? Is it depicting an ecosystem being born?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the line between catastrophic destruction and biological birth is incredibly thin. In the natural world, it's a closed, dependent loop. The volcanic imagery and the biological patterns you've identified, they actually share one profound mechanism.
Which is?
Creation fundamentally requires destruction as fuel.
Ah, you cannot build the new architecture without tearing down the old building.
Precisely. Take a volcano. It is the ultimate destructive force on a macro scale. An eruption obliterates existing landscapes, suffocates forests in ash, and liquefies rock. It looks like the end of the world.
Right.
But that cooling magma and the resulting ash cloud chemically transform into the most fertile, mineral-rich soil on the planet. That violent eruption lays the literal geochemical groundwork for explosive, dense ecological growth. The destruction is not just a side effect, it's the prerequisite for the next generation of life.
And that exact same mechanism scales all the way down to the micro level we were talking about earlier.
Sure. Without question, if cellular structures do not constantly self-destruct a biological process called apoptosis, the organism cannot grow. If cells refuse to die and make room, the organism just stagnates, or worse, develops cancer.
Wow.
The healthy tissue must break down, consume itself, and divide to propel life forward. So when we look at the boiling red center of this painting, we aren't looking at a static snapshot of a disaster. We are witnessing the brutal, active machinery of transformation. The old structure is being violently liquefied so that something else can use its energy to emerge.
And that something else is symbolized by those strange neon pink mutations pushing their way through the heavy paint. They are the new life sprouting in the volcanic ash.
Exactly.
And those white markers, the 1, 2, 3, that's just us. That's the human observer, scrambling around the edges of this profound, terrifying birth, trying to stick numerical labels on a force of nature so we aren't completely paralyzed by the sheer unfeeling power of it.
We are trying to measure a cosmic event with a plastic ruler. The painting perfectly captures the sublimity of nature's violence and the simultaneous futility of human beings trying to neatly catalog it.
It takes an image that initially just feels like a heavy, intimidating wash of red paint and turns it into a profound meditation on the mechanics of the universe. The universe is chaotic, it operates through violence, it is deeply, relentlessly creative, and we are just here dropping yellow evidence tents, trying to number the pieces as they fly by.
And it demands that the viewer engage with the extreme discomfort of not knowing exactly what they're looking at, while challenging them to recognize the universal patterns hiding within that ambiguity.
This has been a wild journey through a single image. I mean, we started by staring at a square of abstract crimson pigment, experiencing total visual vertigo as we tried to figure out if we were in orbit looking at a crater or looking through a microscope at a scab.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We navigated the physics of fluid dynamics, explored the evolutionary psychology of why our brains desperately need to drop grids and numbers over chaos, felt the physical eye strain of suffocating green borders, and ended up deep in the philosophy of how destruction is the biological engine for new life. It is staggering how much dense structural narrative can be pulled from a canvas that doesn't feature a single recognizable face, object, or landscape.
You know, the lack of recognizable objects actually brings up one final, perhaps slightly unsettling thought regarding how we consume abstract information.
Oh, what's that?
Well, we have spent this entire time analyzing the mechanisms of what this terrain represents: a volcano, a wound, a map, a biological birth. But there is a well-documented psychological phenomenon known as pareidolia.
Right.
It's the human brain's innate, unavoidable, hardwired desire to find recognizable shapes in completely random noise. It's the mechanism that makes you look at a cloud and see a dragon, or look at that burnt pattern on a piece of toast and see a face.
Yeah, our visual cortex is essentially a hyperactive pattern matching machine. We literally cannot turn it off.
We can't. So the fundamental question you have to ask yourself when analyzing a purely abstract piece of art like this is, does this arrangement of pigment actually contain any inherent objective meaning at all?
Hmm.
Or is a piece like this simply a highly effective, beautifully engineered mirror? When we look into those chaotic red and orange swirls and see a violent, painful wound, or when we look at the pink smudges and see a beautiful cosmic birth, are we actually uncovering the artist's hidden intent? Or is the canvas just a blank screen reflecting our own internal landscapes, our own psychological biases, and our own deepest anxieties right back at us?
Is the chaos actively living on the canvas? Or is the chaos living inside of us, and we are simply projecting it outward onto the paint? That is an absolutely fantastic question to leave on. The next time you find yourself looking at something that seems abstract, overwhelming, or confusing, pay close attention to the specific labels your brain immediately tries to slap onto it to make it safe. The story you tell yourself about the chaos might tell you vastly more about your own mind than it does about the object you are looking at. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep zooming in, keep zooming out, and keep seeking out the fascinating, complex details hiding right there in plain sight.